What is good, everybody? How we doing? How we doing? Um, Somewhat big news. I guess really big news. The Pittsburgh Steelers are sending a 2025 second round pick to Seattle for wide receiver DK Metcalf, signing a new 5-year, $150 million contract in Pittsburgh. $33 million in new money average makes it the largest deal in franchise history. That is word for word. Our good friend Tom Pelissero. Pretty big move, man. It's really funny. I was actually watching Metcalf over the last couple days, just to get an idea for a little refresher of him as a player. So I'm really familiar with his film just because that's what I've been doing the last 36 hours or so. So I know you guys are really excited. A lot of you guys seem pretty pumped up on social media. It's a huge move, man, and DK is a really exciting player, so I can understand the excitement. I am willing to take as many questions about him and his game as I can. Just do me a favor if you guys could. We already got like 164 people in here. If y'all could just throw me a like button, just to help get this thing out to as many people as possible. I sincerely appreciate it. Make sure you're subbed, all that stuff. But yeah, DK Metcalf, really interesting player, man. Seemed like he wanted some stability on his way out of Seattle. I'm not really sure what's going on with Seattle, man. They just traded Geno. Seems like they're going through a little bit of a rebuild, but DK is a household name, man. There just aren't very many receivers really built like him. I mean, guys like this just aren't walking around on the planet. He's almost 6'4", 230 pounds, like legitimate 4.33 speed. And I can confirm, just like after going through like his targets over the last 2 seasons, the speed is absolutely still there. I mean, this dude can still flat out fly. Really long strider, covers a lot of ground with the ease. One of the things that I like about DK too is sometimes these like longer speed threats typically are build-up speed guys, but DK, like, he has a 1.48 10-yard split, and he's still like super explosive off the line of scrimmage. The physical traits are kind of like what has always been like super appealing with him. I'll kind of just like start with some of the stuff I wrote about in terms of like his strengths, things that he does well. So Metcalf primarily in Seattle has been like their ex-receiver, so he's got a lot of experience playing on the line of scrimmage. He's really, really good against press coverage. It's pretty much like where he dominates. The whole idea with him is that you want to force defenses to come up and get near the line of scrimmage, try to press him, and he's going to basically outrun anybody in one-on-one coverage. So huge vertical threat. Quick off the line, like I said, pretty good hand usage. Despite being bigger, cornerbacks do have some issues like trying to stall him at the line of scrimmage too. Even though he's not what I would say great at like decelerating and coming back to the ball, when cornerbacks are like playing off coverage, they're still so scared of his speed that they'll kind of open their hips up and maintain cushion, and he's able to kind of snap back down and work back to the ball. So he's a really rare combination, in my opinion, of like acceleration and top end speed. So the big playability is still there. Just last year, he had 16 catches of over 20 yards down the field. That led the NFL. You look at just like how effective Geno has been over the past 3 years, led the NFL in deep passing touchdowns, I think with like 28 or something like that. I saw that graphic. A lot of those have been to DK. Just the big thing about DK too is like he's just a really natural catcher of the football over his shoulder, which is really good considering like he's so effortless at stacking guys, getting them on their hip. He does a good job like locating the ball, tracking it, and also like making sure he keeps his feet in bounds. Pretty good sideline awareness, I would say. There's some flashes of late hands like in the red zone and on those fade opportunities. I think the big thing like with debates when it comes to receivers is like, is this guy wide receiver one? What is he? I think one of the characteristics of true wide receiver ones that I look for is like, do they tilt the coverage? And what I mean by that is like, do they dictate the way that opposing teams have to play you? So Seattle, they see the 4th most like split safety coverages in the NFL. And a lot of that's really just due to DK because like, even if you have your center fielder playing in the middle of the field, teams just are not comfortable leaving him one-on-one because of the threat that he's just going to run by him. Just the way the NFL prefers to play defense right now, trying to keep a lid on those explosive plays, and like DK can pretty much create those whenever he wants against man coverage. So beats man coverage, is able to separate, win, creates explosive plays. Those are all like really good things. Like I said, he's really good too. Like he he had some really nice plays against like on double moves as well. There was one I think against the Dolphins last year where he ran a little like dig and go against quarters coverage. Quarter safety kind of bid down on the dig, and he just ran right past him. So for a huge play. So DK is one of those guys that he has the ability to kind of take over a game and kind of flip a game in one play. But just other things too with that comes with that is like he does change the math for the offense as well. Because of those split safety coverages, you're also going to be facing lighter boxes. Seattle didn't run the ball very effectively over the last couple of years. That really wasn't his fault. I'm not really sure what else he could have done, honestly. But that's one of the things that you look for with him is, you know, especially in Arthur Smith's system, which you're going to get a lot of like condensed formations, a lot of heavy personnel. You're going to have to kind of make those decisions, sort of like with Pickens in a way too, where you have to make your decision of, are you going to roll an eighth guy, seventh guy up in the box, or are you going to play split safeties? So it's kind of like a pick your poison type of thing there. So there's a lot to like with that. Now, in terms of like go routes, it's really like the two things that DK really does. He runs goes and he runs slants, and he does both of them pretty much as good as anybody in the league. He can cross the face of defenders on slants, other end breakers. Like I said, pretty good off the line of scrimmage, keeping his hands free. He'll swat guys' hands down off his frame as he gets into the stem. When he's in rhythm, you hit him in stride. He's able to, you know, take those catches the distance. Good yards after catch ability because, again, you get the speed in the open field. The rest of his game, like I said, is really just predicated around like his verticality. Does have good play strength. He is able to go over the middle and like make catches away from his frame. When you throw it to him over the middle, he can absorb hits, absorb contact, and maintain possession of the ball through the ground. It's one of the things I really like about him. He is pretty tough, like I said, with the ball in the air. The other thing that I think is nice, regardless of who's at quarterback, there's been some stuff out there saying that the Steelers are probably going to take a swing, maybe throw an offer at Sam Darnold. Regardless if it's Russ, Geno, Darnold, he's played with the first two of those guys. But Metcalf is also pretty good in the scramble drill. Like he will work back to the quarterback. He'll find soft spots and zones. Him and Geno were almost as good as him and Russ were in that regard. So there's a lot to like about that. For a guy of his height, I also kind of noted in like my scouting report knows that he was pretty good about scooping balls off of the turf. So low throws, he was able to get down there and secure those passes that were pretty difficult and typically are way more difficult for those bigger, taller guys. Now, I need y'all to stick with me here because y'all know how we do on this channel. Y'all know how we get down. We got to go over the positives, the negatives. So just stick with me. And then while I go over like some constructive criticism type of stuff, and then we'll kind of get into how this affects Pickens, how this affects the offense, all this other stuff, right? So there is some misunderstandings, I think, about Metcalf's game and the things that he does well, okay? So Metcalf is a huge wide receiver, but he doesn't always play big at the catch point. And that's like a really disappointing part of his evaluation, right? 71 contested catch chances over the past 2 years. He's hauled in just 24 of them. That's 32.8%, according to Pro Football Focus. It matches the tape. He just does not always go up and box guys out the way you would expect with his frame. He sometimes like mistimes his jump to where he can't take a full advantage of his leaping ability to like high point the football. So those are always like kind of disappointing because I thought when he first came into the league in like 2020, 2021, he went crazy and like had all these contested catch opportunities. And just over the past 3 or 4 years, those haven't been there, especially in comparison to like what other wide receiver ones do. You want to have that ability to throw it up to your guy and those gotta have it moments. And like DK, unfortunately, just doesn't come down with those as consistently as you'd like. It's not that he can't make spectacular catches because he absolutely can. You look at his highlight, even if you go look at the highlights on YouTube, you'll see him. It's just he doesn't consistently play to his size, which is disappointing, to be honest with you. The other thing I think about DK's game that is frustrating when you watch the film, I'm sure you guys have heard me talk about, like when we talk about receivers on here, like scouting, things like that, being quarterback friendly and understanding like what that means. I mean, I did a whole film room on Emeka Egbuka for Ohio State for channel members and like literally talked about like, these are examples of how to be quarterback friendly, right? DK is not always like quarterback friendly. And the reason for that is like he is like a habitual offender of drifting up the field on his routes. And it's led to like there's been, I think, 2 interceptions in each of the past 2 seasons where he's been like drifting up the field, and it's allowed a cornerback to kind of cut underneath him in big time situations like fourth quarter, things like that, to where it ended up turning the ball over. There was also another example last year against the Niners where he just like they were running wide cross and he's on the backside and he's supposed to be like running a dig, and he runs the dig, takes like 2 steps, and then I think he just maybe thinks he's not going to get the ball or Geno's not going to get back to him. He just quits on the route, and like Geno's trying to throw it with anticipation. He just throws it right to the cornerback, and like Metcalf comes and tries to make the tackle. So the lack of detail in his route running is still like a thing. I think there's some people out there that would think that he like doesn't separate. Like DK does separate on the things that he does well. Like he can run away from coverage. It's not a separation thing. It's actually one of those things where he's a very unique wide receiver in that he only runs a couple different routes, but he runs them so well that I really wouldn't care about a diversified route tree. He does all the things you need an X receiver to do. It's just if he was actually more consistent at the catch point and dominated the way that his size would say he should dominate, you would be thinking like, because there are games that you can go look at, especially, especially like a couple years ago, I would say, where like he looks like one of the best 5 receivers in the NFL, and like physically, you should say that he should be that, right? But that just hasn't necessarily been the case. But at the same time, like, depending on what your definition of wide receiver 1 is, whatever, there definitely aren't 30 guys better than this dude on any given Sunday. I think you just have to kind of understand that he is a little bit more volatile than some of the other guys. I don't think he's necessarily dissimilar to a guy like George Pickens in that regard. Like, you have to make sure you keep him involved. Another thing that I think is notable, I don't think that Ryan Grubb in Seattle did a great job maximizing the things that he does well. For example, they were facing a lot of off coverage last year, and I already kind of mentioned like the whole thing with DK is you want defenses to press. So one of the things that they just didn't do enough of was like they didn't give him enough like smoke opportunities. And what I mean by that is like if the quarterback's, even if he's in the gun or under center, you just kind of want to pitch the ball out to him because he's so big. You want to force cornerbacks that are sometimes 180, 190 pounds. You want to force them up to the line of scrimmage and force them to tackle him, right? Instead of just letting them kind of hang out at the 8 to 10 yard mark. Because it's not like you can't take those freebies out there for hitches and things like that, but it's like make those guys tackle because he still has the opportunity to create explosive plays after the catch with his physicality, with his speed. So that's kind of the skinny on what DK is as a player. Obviously, I'm planning on doing a film room for DK, so I'll show all these examples that I'm talking about. But we'll talk about that, at a later date. But I know there's a lot of questions in here about like what's going to happen with Pickens. I kind of touched on this in the article that I did for Steelers Now. To me, I think it's interesting that they made this deal now, but I don't see a world where you're going to get great value or return on investment out of either guy if they're both here in the same offense, just because I think they're kind of both X receivers at their best. They kind of win on the same routes. They just do it differently. Like Pickens is going to win vertically because he's got the great body control. It's not to say he can't run by guys, but he's got the good body control. I think he's also a little bit more consistent at the catch point, maybe not as much last year. I do think that Pickens is more flexible in his lower body to where like he could be a more diversified route runner, but we just haven't really seen that consistently to this point. And I also think it's just one of those things where he's entering the last year of his deal. Now, could they go into the season and play both of these guys? Maybe because Metcalf is like strictly an X receiver. He can't, like, you're not going to play him anywhere else. And I kind of feel that way about George as well. Could they go into the season next year with both of those guys and just say, hey, we're going to take our shot. We're going to be a really run heavy offense. And we're going to go bombs away on the outside with size and speed. And that's how we're going to try to win. That's fine. But I just think, receiver rooms, normally you want to try to build those things out like a basketball starting 5, where it's like, it's not that you can't have 2 really good players. Like I think Pickens is a good player. I think DK is a good player. It's not that you can't have 2 good players. It's just like you wouldn't want them operating in the same space. And they kind of just run the same routes and do the same things really well, just a little bit differently. So to me, I would probably want to go get more of a a complementary piece, whether it's, a route runner type of Z, whether it's a guy that can create yards after the catch, maybe it's a guy. I mean, you could look at any different way. I mean, I think they have 2 speed slot guys already. So you already got Calvin Austin, you got Roman Wilson for that type. You got the tight ends in there too. But I don't really think it makes a ton of sense. And to me, like you gave the second away to go get DK. I get it for sure. Because I mean, if they feel like DK is a more physically dominant player, I understand trying to make that upgrade, especially if, from what I had heard, even leading up to this, is like the Steelers have not even like considered extending George, and like with the cap and how much they're paying DK, I would be kind of surprised if they went that kind of way. And that's why I kind of said that I kind of feel like they're going to end up trading George before the draft or on draft weekend. That's just my opinion. But yeah. All right. I see we got a bunch of questions in here. I'm gonna try to sort through these as much as possible, y'all. I appreciate y'all hanging out with me. Just again, we got 500 people in here. This is getting kind of close to the Justin Fields live stream that we did last year. So, but yeah, pretty solid player, man. The only thing weren't the reports last year will be willing to. I'm not sure if that was the case. I mean, I heard the same things last year that they really weren't. I mean, Pickens still had 2 years left on his deal. So, I mean, I don't know that that thought had really crossed their mind. The difference between like Ayuk is like, yeah, Ayuk's an X receiver, but they can do different things. Ayuk's a route runner. So it's not like you have overlapping kind of skill sets. So, so that's kind of the thing. As far as like, would they be willing to pay 2? I don't know. The big thing for me is like, regardless of how you feel about DK, the player, the value that they got, anything like that, it's just nice to me that they're actually being aggressive and going out, solving a problem. One of the things that I always think is a bad sign for a front office is, if you have the same problems year over year. So, for example, if your offensive line or your pass rush is terrible, and then the very next year you don't make significant upgrades to make sure that you take care of that problem, that's the sign of poor management, right? And it's obviously the receiver room was a problem last year. They played Van Jefferson over 700 snaps, so that was a problem, and it kind of came back to bite them. They didn't have enough firepower, and I think if they obviously view him as one of the best receivers in the NFL. So if he could be that for him, that's a huge boon for the offense. Aaron, I appreciate the super chat, brother, and for you tuning in. Running back round 1 or round 3, no round 2 pick now. Yeah, it is interesting what they're going to do at running back, because we know that this is probably still going to be a run-heavy offense, right? That's just kind of Arthur Smith's identity. It's what he wants to do. We still don't even know who the quarterback's going to be, right? Regardless of who it is, if it's Sam, if it's Russ, or if it's Justin, you don't ideally want to be dropping back, 38, 40 times with those guys. That's not the world that the Steelers are going to need to be living in. Could they take one in round 1? Yeah. I kind of wonder though, like if we live in the universe that say they keep George for 1 year and they're not able to get that second round pick back, or they're not able to get a third for George or something like that, would they consider trading down in the first round and maybe try to recoup another day 2 pick? I think that's a pretty that's an intriguing idea for me personally, just because if you guys follow me on Twitter, or you've just been following along with the draft content that Nick and I have been doing on the channel, you guys know that I feel like the 20 from really like the 20 to like 65 range of this draft, like there's a lot of similarly valued players. There's a lot of day 2 guys. There's the running back class is really deep too, so I really like the idea of going to get a tailback at some point. I don't know if you necessarily want to wait until day 3, but there will be guys on day 3 that I think can come in and like take carries as a rookie. So it's a good year to need a running back. They obviously don't have one of their picks now to go do so, but they did solve another pretty big issue at receiver with this trade. So I'm gonna try to go through the comments. DK's cool. Show some love. Hit that like button. I appreciate you, Steven. What's going on, Stanley? How you doing, brother? Let's see. I know Nick Saban built it like a hoop team, but it's overrated. I don't know. I mean, it's just kind of hard for me to envision, because you're still going to have just more diversity, in my opinion, or else you're going to become predictable. But we'll see. I mean, they absolutely could for sure. We'll see. I think DK's 27, will be 28, right? I don't think that's the craziest thing. Did they overpay? I mean, I thought that this whoever traded for DK was probably going to have to at least give up a third and a player. So I mean, a second round pick, I think maybe a little bit high, but I don't think it's like a crazy overpay if you love the player. I mean, I think that's the thing about DK is one of the things that I had talked about was one of the things that I had talked about was that, you know, he's the best. I mean, I think he's probably the best speed threat in the league. I mean, there just aren't very many guys that can do what he does. Obviously, he's more limited than the other like tier one guys or maybe even the tier two receivers, but there's not really any other player that plays like him. So if you just really value that skill set in terms of making sure teams don't play single high and making sure that you can create explosive plays, I mean, I can't imagine thinking anything other than this being worth it. But obviously, the caveat too is like you got to have a quarterback that's capable of throwing the deep ball. That's one thing that like DK has really benefited from. Russ, obviously, in his time in Seattle, Russ was an incredible deep ball thrower. I mean, he was even a good deep ball thrower last year. Who knows? I'm still a little bit skeptical if they like ran it back with Russ, but we'll see. I think Geno, same thing. Geno's a really accurate deep ball quarterback. So if they do go somewhere else, if it's Darnold, who knows who else, a draft pick, whatever, those guys, I mean, he will help them with the deep ball stuff because of how open he gets. But you are going to need somebody that throws with nice touch down the field. And that's not everybody. But I don't have any concerns with Darnold in that regard. I would really need to go back and watch some of his tape from last year and some of the numbers to kind of see what that looks like. Would you bring back James Daniels? I mean, I personally would, but I know the team didn't really have any interest in signing to an extension last year. So I can't really see them wanting to do that now coming off the injury. But I mean, yeah, I would kind of like I'd like to keep Daniels for sure. I think he's going to be able to go be elsewhere and try to be a starter for sure. Still want Javarius Ward. Yeah, we're gonna have enough money to sign a quarterback. I really wouldn't stress about that. Gonna have enough money to sign a quarterback. Gonna have enough money to sign a corner. I'm not pressed about that stuff. They had $63 million in cap space. We haven't even seen the contract to really know like what the year one cap hit's gonna be for DK. But they have plenty of money, and they have more avenues to create money, right? Like there's an avenue to where like you extend TJ Watt and lower his cap hit. I mean, they've got other cap casualties on the roster that I'm quite frankly surprised that are still on the roster. Guys like Larry Ogunjobi, you can save money by cutting him. Cordero Patterson, there's a little bit of chunk of change right there. So there's a couple guys that you can move on from and still create more space. I'm not tripping about the cap space at all. The big thing here is like they got a really good wide receiver, and that's something that they needed. So let's see. What quarterback this year makes most sense? Geno. No, I mean I don't anybody who can throw the deep ball, man. Like I said, you just got like what you're gonna get with DK. Slants goes, he's gonna dominate on both of those. That's what it is. So whoever can throw the ball in that regard, that's what you want. So, but I think that'll be it'll be fun to watch for sure. I mean, this is going to be absolutely a bonkers week, especially if today is any indication. Mel, appreciate the super chat. Are we drafting a quarterback? If so, who do you think? Oh man, that's tough. I think Nick and I are going to try to do quarterbacks sometime next week or the week after. We're going to do our top fives for the draft. It's interesting. I mean, I know they spent some time in Indy with all the quarterbacks. They've seen most of those guys multiple times now. Tyler Shuck was in the house for a visit to the facility, I think this week. So he's actually somebody I'm writing about right now for Steelers Now. So Shuck, I could see them taking a swing on him. Of course, without like another day 2 pick, it's kind of hard to envision them taking a quarterback like early, I guess, unless they were just in love with somebody. But maybe Shuck in round 3 if he's still there. It doesn't seem like he's gonna be. Um, but yeah, we're gonna talk a lot about the quarterback situation here in the next couple of days. But if I had to guess, I would say that they don't take one early. That's just the vibe that I'm getting, to be honest with you. Maybe like 3rd or 4th round, but again, it kind of is all dependent on if they're able to make another move and acquire another draft pick. Because as of right now, they've still got a decent amount of holes, and you're going to need those picks to kind of fill those out. All right, let's see here. I'm going to be live for probably like 5 or 10 minutes because I was actually in the process of coming to my basement to record another video for you guys. I'm actually doing a video on some free agent wish list players. So I got like 9 or 10 guys that I'm going to write up and talk about, aside from the wide receivers and corners that we've already talked about in the past couple of weeks. So I'm excited for you guys to watch that video, but I do have to still like record that, edit it down, everything. And then, I'll be getting started on the DK film room. So, but I'll stay on here for a couple more minutes to try to answer as many questions as I can. Larry's got to go unless he's the 4 or 4. I mean, it's just you can get this defensive line class in the draft is just so freaking it's so freaking loaded that you can look up and down the board and see 15 guys that can do what Larry O did last year for them. In terms of rushing the passer, he's not like a great run defender anyway. We're going to talk about some guys in the video that I think could like replace him and then some. So yeah, I mean, for me personally, I think if you're looking for ways to upgrade on the defensive side of the ball, he's got to be one of them. So not that he's like a terrible player. It's just, they didn't get good return on investment on that one. I don't believe you, Alex. You're going to be watching. You're going to be locked in, brother. I don't believe you, man. Don't believe you. DK probably means no Caleb Johnson. That would be heartbreaking, wouldn't it? That would be heartbreaking. Let's go. Let's go. Do I like Jonathan Allen? Yeah, I do. I know he had the injury last year that kind of hurt him a little bit. The production was down, but Allen's always been able to rush the passer, man. He's strong as an ox. He's got that hump move. He can bull rush. He's always been productive. He even like another thing too was I saw him do some really good things in the playoffs too. So it looked like he was definitely on his way back to being like himself. He's only 30 years old, so we'll see what happens with that. But yeah, if in the event that they do bring George back for another year and run it back with him and DK, it is going to be hilarious because it is going to be so chaotic because both of them are just like full crash out guys nonstop. But it will be fun. It'll make the season fun. I mean, if I've been telling everybody, Nick, Smitty, everybody, man, I'm full team chaos at all times. If they're not going to compete for a Super Bowl, I at least want them to be entertaining, man. And I think they'll be really entertaining with DK and George. I think it means Najee's back. Man, I don't know. I think Najee's a Raider. I'd be really surprised if Najee's there. Trevor, you look out, I don't kick you out for that comment, man. Caleb's a dog. All right, last one here. I think maybe. How does Darnold fit in Smith's scheme if they go with him? It's a good question. It's something I really want to answer for myself once I get to the film. But just from seeing Darnold last year, just some of my thoughts, I thought that the first half of the season, I wasn't super impressed. It felt like he was getting away with a lot of turnover-worthy plays and just felt like a lot of schemed up production. But I did feel like the second half of the season, and this is just mostly me watching live, by the way. I did feel like the second half of the season was more about him just playing lights out. It was the best football I'd ever seen him play. He wasn't, making like it wasn't being all gifted to him. Like he was exceeding the scheme. He was making a lot of big time throws, playing some really good ball against some good defenses too. So I'm interested to see what that means for like how that translates outside of Minnesota. I've already like talked about this a little bit, but it is going to be hard to replicate. It is going to be really hard to replicate Justin Jefferson. There's only, one of those guys, Jordan Addison, one of the better wide receiver twos in the league, TJ Hawkinson, all that stuff. Totally get that. But Minnesota's interior offensive line was like a disaster last year, and their tackle situation wasn't much better once Darisaw went out. So there are some things that you can look at and say, like, hey, maybe if our offensive line comes together and this and that, you're going to need a big step forward from Broderick Jones. Going to need to run the ball at least semi-efficiently, but all that stuff goes for any quarterback. Whether it's one they re-sign or whoever they bring in, that's going to have to be the case. I mean, they've got to figure out how to run the football. Otherwise, it's not going to matter what type of fit Darnold is. The one thing I will say about that I'm excited about potentially is Darnold was really, really good off play action last year. So that's an element of the offense that's been missing, I think, since like Bruce Arians left. I mean, really, like after the Ben Bruce era, we pretty much haven't seen good play action offense since then. But just Darnold, I'm looking at some of the numbers right now. Off play action, he completed 72% of his passes. He was 16 touchdowns, 3 picks, 15 big time throws. Did have 6 turnover worthy plays, but Darnold to me is just he's definitely got flashes on tape and that I've seen live, but there's also some lows too. So you have to be mindful of that. He didn't play well in the playoffs. Didn't play well in the last regular season game either. So it's probably going to be a roller coaster ride. I think depending on the cost, I'm still intrigued, but I'm not necessarily completely sold either. DB late to the stream. Appreciate you joining, Richard. Yeah, we've talked a little bit about Darnold, Justin. I mean, either of those guys, I can't really bring myself to sign off on bringing Russ back. I know the familiarity with DK is going to probably get more people on board with that potential idea. It's just, to me, I don't see how the offense next year is going to be different enough to where you're going to be able to have a top 10 offense, which is really where you need to compete in the playoffs. So I would prefer to just go with somebody else and try to play my cards like that and build around another quarterback. So it seems like Darnold's going to be an option. Justin, so those two guys, we'll see what happens, right? But yes, yeah, the free agency tampering period starts tomorrow. So if we get any crazy news, I'll probably go live. If we don't get any crazy news, I'll probably just do reaction videos. And then, depending on how many signings we got, I'll try to start working on the film rooms and stuff. I want to get that content to you guys out. I do really enjoy it. But first, I will have that video for the free agency wish list. I'll have that up tonight for channel members. For everybody else, I'll put that up in the morning. If you are interested in becoming a member to the channel, link will be in the description. I appreciate you guys rocking with me on here. If you guys could, on the way out, just hit that like button. Make sure you subscribe. Turn notifications on just in case you don't see my tweet or something like that for when we go live on the channel. You guys can get notified on that as well. I will holler at you guys very soon. Should be a very, very interesting week for the Steelers and free agency. But I'll holler at y'all later. Peace and love.